Happy video day, guys, and happy Make Up Your Mind day. So today we're doing a brand new Make Up Your Mind because a new palette released that you guys have probably already seen, and it is this beauty right here from Haus Labs, which is Lady Gaga's brand, and it is called the Stupid Love Palette. It actually retails for $48 US, so it's not a cheap palette. It comes with a lot of tones in it, but I was looking at it and I will tell you that for Lady Gaga's brand, I was a little intrigued because her first release, I actually didn't even remember that she released an eyeshadow palette before this one because it was a little bit less of what I would have expected from Haus Laboratories being Lady Gaga's brand. This looks a lot more like what I was thinking when I was thinking of Haus Labs. So I'm interested in this palette. The only thing that caught me a little bit was the blues. If you guys are new to Make Up Your Mind, what I do in this series is basically I look through my collection and I try to recreate a palette with items that I already currently own. This is a way that I kind of figure out whether I want to purchase a brand new release or not. I swatch it all in my arms, the entire color story, then I kind of check it out and say, well, would I use these colors? How often do I use these colors? And do I have already too many of these colors in my collection? And it's the way that I kind of decide whether I want to buy a palette or not. At the end of this video, I do make up my mind whether I think it's worth it or not. And I always tell you guys, try this on your own at your own house with your own palettes and see what you come up with. I did find a lot of these hues in my collection. Some of them I'm not 100% sure on, but I did think that I found a pretty good amount. So on Instagram, I did post my Insta challenge of Make Up Your Mind. I posted this picture right here, and I asked you guys, what palette do you think I'm going to do next? And I'm gonna go ahead and share with you guys a few names of the people who actually on Instagram guessed correctly. So they knew I was gonna do the Stupid Love palette just based off of the few tones that I swatched on my arm. So congratulations to you guys. You guys guessed it right and you guys did an awesome job. Like seriously, sometimes when you guys guess things, I'm like, how did they know it was that palette from like a few colors? If you guys aren't following me on Instagram though, my Instagram is at Christina Brooke Beauty. I would love it if you would jump over there and follow me over there so you can participate in my Insta challenges and maybe get featured in my next Make Up Your Mind. So let's go ahead and let's jump into every single one of the palettes. I'm going to show you guys my results. I'm pretty excited for this one and let's get into it right now. So this is an 18 shadow palette. An 18 pan palette. I think that probably sounds better, right? So this is an 18 pan palette. So there's a lot of colors in here. And I will give it to Haus Laboratories. They did a nice combination of colors where I was not feeling like I could only stick to one palette. Now I will tell you, when you jumped into this little section, like over here towards the end, there is one palette that I think kind of dominated it. But some of the other tones, I did have to jump around a lot. So let me go ahead and show you guys my results. So these are the results. These are my swatches and these are the Haus Laboratories swatches. Now I also compared it to their Insta Story swatches as well because the coloration I feel on Insta Story was really good, whereas you know sometimes the Adobe photoshopped swatches are not as fantastic as when you actually see them under daylight. So I did use both of these different images to kind of come up with this color story. I feel like I was able to find most of the tones, not every single one exact, but similar enough that you'll be able to create a similar look. So let me go ahead and show you guys the palettes. So the first one that I jumped into, and I will tell you, I did get a few tones out of this palette. So this palette was probably one of the most used palettes. It is the Jaclyn Hill Original Morphe collaboration. This palette had probably the most tones, at least the most similar tones in at least the warm section. You guys will see as we go into it. The other one that I feel like had a majority of the tones was also my Sephora Pro. This is the Editorial palette. When it came to the blues, I did have to jump into a few palettes because I don't own a palette that is like primarily blue. And this is a lot of blue, you know? So a lot of this palette, it has quite a bit of blue. So I had to jump into my Mini Tropic for, I think it was 2 colors. I jumped into the Natasha Denona Holiday palette for this beautiful blue right here. I also jumped into, and this one I added because I feel like this color matched more. I think I could have used one of the other palettes, but I decided to just jump into Natasha Denona's Gold palette for a blue that's inside of here. Then some of the other tones, some of those pinky-ish tones actually came both out of the Natasha Denona Mini Retro. I grabbed one tone from a Makeup Geek single because this is probably the hardest color to find in this entire palette, and I'll show you when we get there. It's this one called Slate from Makeup Geek. Okay, so then they included a glittery black. So of course, Tati Beauty Textured Neutrals is where I found that. And finally, the last blue combination that I had to create was coming out of the My Little Pony palette from ColourPop. So those are all the palettes that I used to create this color story, which you guys already saw under daylight, so you guys can really see the colors that I picked. But yeah, I feel like I was able to create a very similar color scheme. Very, very, very similar, and I have some thoughts, and I will get into that at the end of this video. But let's go ahead and let's go step by step of each one of these colors so I can show you what I found and what I'm thinking. Okay. So let's start off with the first color. So the first color was interesting because it looks to me from the swatches and from the multiple swatches that I looked at, it's not a true teal, but it's not a true blue. I jumped into Jaclyn Hill and I got this color called Jada, which is really teal, and it was too teal. So what I did was I mixed it with the Mini Tropic and this blue right here called Laguna. When you put Laguna on top of Jada and you kind of mix them in together, you see, you mix them in together, they start to turn into like a teal blue. It gets the best of both worlds. It has a little bit of that teal color, but it also has that light blue fusion into it, which reminds me a lot of the color that's inside of this brand new palette. Now, I will tell you, this is one of the colors that gave me the hardest time. I actually had to step away from this color a couple of times and then come back to it until I finally settled on Jada and Laguna mixed together. So I will say that color is pretty unique. I mean, I don't think that everybody has this color in their collection. It's not a color I tend to use very often though. So the next one I feel like I found very quickly, and it was because I remembered in my Sephora Pro, the last color here is this gorgeous like silver metallic. Now it is a pretty color. It's the color I have all over my lids. I don't think it's going to be as vibrant as the one that's coming out in this brand new Haus Labs palette, in the Stupid Love palette, but I don't know. I guess I do like silver. I do like silver. So like the first two colors, they're interesting. They are interesting, but blue. I have a thing against blue. You know, I don't love blue. So the next one is another blue, and this blue reminded me so much of Tiger Lily inside of the Natasha Denona Tropic. I hate this color inside of the Tropic. It really takes a really long time to build up, but when you shove your finger in there and you really mix it in, you get a beautiful tone. But when you apply it, it just takes a little bit longer to build up. You really gotta press it in, and I don't feel like you can even use a brush really for it. You have to actually use your finger to really get that payoff that you need. So I'm interested in this color inside of the Haus Labs one because it literally looks like Tiger Lily. It looks like the same color. It probably has a lot smoother of an application than Tiger Lily does. So that to me is a pretty color, but it's not gonna make me buy a palette because I don't love blue. So the next one, I remembered a color that looks so similar to this because the other day I was doing a Natasha Denona ranking video, and I almost wanted to rank this Holiday Aries palette higher just because of this blue that is absolutely insane. And I decided not to at the end, but this blue is insane, and it reminds me a lot of the blue that's inside of the new Haus Labs palette. But I will say, I love the blue in this Aries palette, but I hardly ever use it. And I know it's amazing. So these are already little signs to me, like, you know, you have this amazing blue that looks so similar to the one in the Haus Labs, but you hardly ever touch it, Christina. So I'm already looking at the first section right here and going, I'm not sure. The next one, what I did was I jumped into Laguna inside the Mini Tropic, and I jumped into color. It kind of gives you that frosty, very light blue that is not really like, it's kind of like a really light blue, and depending on how you blend it out, you can get it a little bit more sheer, a little bit more pastel, or you can kind of build it up and make it a little bit more saturated of a blue, but it reminds me of what's inside of this palette. So this next tone, this one gave me the hardest time. I really wanted to just stick to some of the palettes that I already had out and not add any more. But I don't know, I saw a tutorial on her Insta story, and when they used the next color, it reminded me so much of my gold palette, this beautiful color right here that is actually called Aurora. It is the coolest color because when you apply it, it almost applies like a little bit sheer, but as you build it up, it becomes this beautiful glittery blue that's just kind of insane. It's kind of, I put it here built up, but it's kind of like a dusky blue. It's a beautiful blue. Now, when I was looking at the Insta story, it reminded me a lot of this color more than it does in the swatches that they released from Haus Labs. So I ended up going with the color I believe it is from the Insta story version. So I think that this one may look closer to this color. It could. Now, if it doesn't, the other option would be this color up here inside of the Mini Tropic. I don't think it's going to be that icy blue because I feel like you already have something icy right here. So I do feel like it's going to look more like the Natasha Denona one. And this section right here, very pretty, very pretty, very blue. Very, very, very blue. Okay, so the next color, it's played with my eyes a little bit, but I believe, I believe that this is a black with glitter in it. I'm pretty sure. What I did was I jumped into the textured neutrals from Tati Beauty, and she has this beautiful black with glitters in it, but because it has these gorgeous glitters in it, it kind of gives you almost an effect of like some brown in it because of all the glitters. So I almost feel like that's what's happening also with the Haus Labs one. Like it's kind of coming across a little bit brownish, but it's really black, but it has a lot of glitter. That's what I'm going with. That's what I think. So I ended up just picking that tone and thinking that it's kind of similar. I don't know. The next one, this is probably the most unique, and I'm saying that because it was hard to find. And I, at the end of the day, do not know 100% if I found this color. This would be a color that I would say could make you sway to buy a palette because it's very different. What I ended up doing was grabbing my My Little Pony palette, grabbing this color right here at the end, this color right here to lighten it up, and dabbing so slightly into the purple and kind of mixing them all together. And when you mix them all together, you get this blue shifting purple tone. It's what I feel like the Haus Lab one is going to look like because it's directly next to a real purple. So I have a feeling that the reason it's in that line is because it's shifting a little purple. So by adding in that purple from the My Little Pony, I got it to shift purple, and it actually is a really pretty color. So if anything, that's probably one of the prettiest colors in this palette from what I have swatched so far that I'm like, ooh. But then if we keep going, this other section, it really reminded me a lot of this palette right here. So I really feel like, honestly, this palette right here has a similar vibe. It does not have all the blues at all, and it's not gonna give you the exact same colored eyes, but you've got a few blues in here, you've got warm tones in here, and it is kind of like a similar idea. The next color I actually pulled from Jaclyn Hill, and it's this color right here called Royalty. This has to be almost the same exact purple. I mean, I swatched this like a bunch of different purples, and this looks like a very similar purple. I feel like this one may be almost spot on, almost spot on. But then we come to the next color, and I feel like this is another one that was unique. Unique in the sense that every time I looked at the different swatches, I could not get, is it a brown or is it a gray? I feel like it's a brownish gray. So what I ended up doing was just saying this Makeup Geek color in Slate, it looks gray, but when it swatches, it almost gives you like this brownish gray with a little bit of purple hints to it. And when you apply it to your lid, it almost looks like that too. I believe that the one in the Haus Labs may be similar to this color. However, I think it might be a little bit deeper. That's the only thing I can think. This color is also something that would be, in my opinion, pretty unique. I own a lot of palettes, and I don't feel like I was able to come up with a very similar tone. Maybe the Subculture kind of slate-ish color in there might give you a little bit of a deeper one than this slate color, but that's the closest I can get. That's what I ended up going with. I'm not sure on this color, but that's what I ended up going with. The next color I am a little bit more sure of. So what I did was I went into my Sephora Pro again, and my first color inside of here is actually a white. very, very, very white. And it looks like a very, 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 very white tone inside of this new palette. I believe that this is going to be almost the same. I also have inside of my Riviera palette a super, super stark, stark white color. And I believe they went stark white because it kind of goes a lot with the blues. If it's a little bit more cream, then I've got so many palettes with a creamish white. Like, I feel like the stark whites, I only have 2, but all the rest of my palettes are like creamy whites. And those, if it's that color, then I've got that for days, but I feel like it's more stark white. And the next one I ended up staying inside of Sephora. The next one I ended up staying inside of the Sephora Pro, and I went into this 4th tone right here. So now this 4th tone is almost like a silvery white. Looking at the palette, that is the color that I felt like matched the most from the ones that I pulled out. I feel like that one looked the most similar to the swatch and also to the Insta story. So I felt like within this palette, you're kind of getting a lot of like the silvery kind of tones. And yeah, I feel like that one kind of it's not like a color that's gonna make me want to buy the palette anyways, but so I remembered inside of Retro, there was this really pretty tone right here, which gives me like kind of like a dusky pink metallic. And I feel like that's really similar to the color that I'm seeing inside of Haus Labs. Now I do have a few palettes that have a similar tone to this one. Also inside of the Jaclyn Hill palette, there's a few pinks. If you guys owed it on the top, there's a lot of little metallic pinks in there. So I feel like I've got a few metallic pinks that I could dabble into. But I feel like if you use this one, you're probably gonna come out with a similar look. And as I was looking at this one, I found the next one because it was sitting like right next door. Beautiful color called Vintage Taupe. Vintage Taupe is like a pinky, it's a pinky tone, but it's not like that Barbie-ish pink. It's kind of like a pastel petally pink. And I really feel like it looks similar to what I'm seeing in the swatch. However, if it is a little bit more, if it's a little bit more Barbie pink, I do have Barbie pink inside of my mini light, which you guys know shows up like in every single one of these videos. But I am going to go with Retro for this one because I think it's a little bit more like the retro color. So that's what I'm going with. Okay, so now for the last few, I actually feel like I stuck in this palette a lot. This is where I see that Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette like really sticking out, is this section right here that I almost feel like, wow, a lot of the colors ended up coming from here at a certain point. Actually, you probably could have gotten the pink from here too. But the next color I pulled was this one right here called Firework inside of the Jaclyn Hill palette. Now, I was kind of in between a few shades for this one from the Jaclyn Hill palette. I ended up going with this one because I feel like the first tone that shows up that's similar to this one is light, and then at the end you're gonna see one that goes deeper. So that's the one I ended up going with. I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty close in color, maybe not exact, but pretty close in color. So the next one I actually feel like is going to be very close. It's this color right here called Chip, and this is a color that I used on my outer edge. My eye look today is using colors that I swatched today, so it's gonna be like a similar look you could create. I wanted something a little bit more subtle because I am gonna be filming an H&M haul today, which is this shirt that I'm wearing and some other stuff. So I wanted to not go crazy with the eyes, but I did use this color Chip, and I feel like this color looks almost spot on. Actually, when I saw the swatch of it, I go, ooh, I've seen that color, and I just jumped straight into this palette and I found it here. So the next one, actually looking in here, I kind of looked at this one. Now, Hunts. This color reminds me so much of it too. It's almost like an orange, but it's not so orange. It's almost like a deeper orange, and I feel like that is kind of the tone that I'm seeing. I don't think that this is like one of those really strong oranges. I feel like it's more of an orange with a little red in it, so that's why I went with this color. I believe it's going that direction, at least from the swatches. That's the direction I think it's going. Finally, the last color is the one that I told you I ended up going a little deeper for, is this one called Hillster from the Jaclyn Hill palette. It actually gives you a deeper version of the one that I showed you before that I said I thought was the lighter, and this is the deeper one. So this one I almost feel like is pretty spot on as well. And yeah, that gives us the entire palette swatched. And I was looking at this for a while. I will say I think that they did a nice job curating the palette. It's a pretty interesting color story. But that being said, I have to shop for myself personally, and for myself personally, it is a cool color story, but I have to say, I'm gonna make up my mind and say that I am not gonna be purchasing this palette because there's so many blues in here, and I personally don't love to wear blue. So I think the palette itself is really pretty for somebody who loves blue. And the reason I'm saying that is because half the palette really is blue. A lot of versions of blue. It's very cute. I like it, personally not for me, but for somebody who likes blue, this could be really interesting. Now there is a whole other half of the palette that does go a little bit more warm tone. You get those pinks in there, which does add fun. But I would say for the most part, those two sections are used separately. Like you don't usually jump into your blues with your reds like you could. You're gonna create pretty interesting eye looks, but I would think most people would stick with the blue section here and then the red section here. So you're gonna be able to create two different types of looks, but it's not like they can intermingle too good together. So just keep that in mind. But if you do love blue, then I think that that's where you probably would say, I'm interested in this. Like I said, for me personally, it's just not something that I really need in my collection. I have a lot of blues that I showed you right now when I swatch these, and I hardly ever use them, like literally hardly ever. So it would just not make sense for me. Either way, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and link Lady Gaga's brand new palette down in the description box. If this seems interesting to you, then definitely I would tell you, go ahead and pick it up. It does seem like it's a cool palette, as well as all of the palettes that I use to create these looks in case any of them called your attention. But I would definitely say that I'm going to be skipping on this one. But I'm definitely gonna say I feel like they went in a very interesting direction, and I'm interested in seeing what else comes out of Haus Labs. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this Make Up Your Mind this week. I will be back with a new Make Up Your Mind next week. Got a few palettes coming back to back to back. So I am a very busy little bee here swatching away for you guys. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.